Morning, everyone. Thank you for your patience with us this morning. Excited for us to kick off the new year with our first EPCE stakeholder group meeting. I hope everyone had a restful holiday and is already off to a productive 2025. I'll give folks a few minutes to settle, a few seconds to settle in. Petra, if you don't mind moving to the next slide for us. Thank you. Alrighty. Well, we have a few new faces who've joined our stakeholder group as well. So I thought we could kick off this morning with just introducing ourselves in the chat. So if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat your name, your organization or type of role, and why you're excited to participate in the EPCE stakeholder group. I'm positively presupposing that everyone's excited to be here and join. So tell us why you're excited. As folks are doing that, I would also just kindly ask for folks to rename themselves in Zoom with your name and organization. It just helps us be able to call on folks and engage. And then just a few quick housekeeping reminders to mute your microphone unless you're speaking. Leave your camera on if possible. It helps us connect with one another. And then to also just actively participate and monitor airtime. We will have some more folks on the call than we have in previous iterations of this stakeholder group, and our team will continue to think through ways to meaningfully engage, have everyone engaged, but also looking to hear from a variety of voices. So excited to be here with everyone today. Let's go to the next slide. Thank you. We've got a pretty robust agenda today. We are going to start out with a kind of EPCE Stakeholder Group 101 overview, give some highlights from our December 2024 SBEC meeting, and then spend, I would say, majority of our time today touching on really critical topics that we want to go deeper with this stakeholder group around over the course of the coming months. So think about this first meeting as a little bit of coming attractions or asks for additional engagement, and then a few areas where we're going to go deeper together. So that will include a preview of some of our work around development of a statewide mentorship training, our EPP data stakeholder working group, some quick overview of some upcoming webinars related to our research-based instructional strategies and supports, and reminder around our Texas-specific TPA grant reminder. And then we are going to spend a little bit more time during our call today going deeper into the bilingual special education teacher standards, which we shared with you all before the holiday for your review. So we're excited to dig in a little bit deeper there. If we go to the next slide, because we had a lot on our agenda, so it's got to be 2 slides this go around. We are also going to provide an update on the effective preparation framework and the continuing approval review process, and then give a preview of what is coming up during the next SBEC meeting, which is scheduled for February 2025. And then we will close out. So wanted to start out with educator preparation, certification and enforcement stakeholder group 101. So if you've been with us in these stakeholder spaces in the past, we've had multiple names for the group that leans in and provides input and feedback for our team here at the TEA and the State Board for Educator Certification. And as we've had a chance over the course of the past few months to really engage with stakeholders, how we can further improve and refine our stakeholder engagement processes, we realized it's beneficial to both open up our stakeholder spaces to gather more diverse input, and also really step back and think about the variety of topics that we're seeking input and collaboration with stakeholders around. And so we've The third time's the charm, y'all. We've renamed our stakeholder group to the EPCE, so Educator Preparation, Certification, and Enforcement Stakeholder Group. And so wanted to just ground us a little bit in what this stakeholder group will look and sound like. So we can go to the next slide. Really, the goal of this stakeholder group is to gather input and feedback and to actively collaborate on topics that are related to educator preparation, certification, enforcement, and educator support from and with experts and stakeholders. All of you that are on this call today and others that may be within your network, so you also think it might be appropriate to join this space. And really the goal here is to help inform policy recommendations that are made to the State Board for Educator Certification and to support practices, including grants, implementation supports, guidance documents, et cetera, that are issued from our team here at the TEA to educator preparation programs, LEAs, and other stakeholders in the field. So pretty broad and ambitious set of goals here, but excited to be able to roll up our sleeves together and engage in this work. If we go to the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Marilyn, who's going to share a little bit more around some of the recent input we've received and kind of how we've landed where we are today.
Marilyn is having some trouble currently getting into the meeting. I'm trying to help her get in right now.
Well, then that is just fine. I will pick it up. I'll keep rolling then. So as I named earlier, we had an opportunity over the course of this past spring and summer to really spend some time with our previous version of the stakeholder group that we called the EPCE and ask them for really some input around how we could improve or refine or continue doing what worked well about our stakeholder engagement processes. And so we surveyed everyone, gathered input, and then brought some recommendations to the SBEC for further refinement, and really landed on a set of proposed actions. And they really fell into three buckets: to update our participant list, so to refresh folks that were kind of standing participants as part of our stakeholder spaces, and also expand our participation to additional groups who have an important perspective to share in this space. So I see representatives from our music education associations that were critical stakeholders in some of our recent policy work and hadn't necessarily been a part of this space previously. Seeing some representatives from school districts and HR departments who are critical partners in this work, but we hadn't necessarily had strong representation previously. And so we've expanded our participant list. So you will see more participants in this space than previously, and we are also opening this invitation to additional participants who are interested in engaging in this work. Second, we also received input to improve the experience of engaging as a stakeholder. And that meant, one, for there to be a predictable, regular cadence of these meetings with clear agendas and opportunity to engage with pre-work in a meaningful timeline prior to the meeting. So you'll see on the next slide that we've established a set of meeting dates for the entirety of the year. You should have received those, as well as calendar invites. We will not be moving those meetings, and we will also send out detailed agendas and pre-work as we did in advance of this meeting prior to those. And second, we also heard that there were, in many cases, topics where folks wanted to go deeper. Maybe you are incredibly passionate about mentoring and really want to be part of the group that's leaning in and collaborating around that work, but maybe aren't as passionate around educator enforcement actions. So there's opportunities we see going forward and you'll see a lot of that embedded throughout the day today. For opportunities for folks to kind of choose their own adventure or lean in further through what we are calling focus topics that are specific areas of relevance related to preparation, certification, enforcement, and support. And then lastly, we heard from our stakeholder group around the value of increased visibility. One, just frankly opening up the participation in this group, I think benefits that increased visibility. But we're also in the process of standing up a EPCE stakeholder webpage that will include agendas from these meetings, the meeting recordings, and I know folks will be very excited, the actual presentation decks. So those will all be available, as well as the kind of attendee list, because we know it will be variable meeting to meeting. We'll also post who attended each one of the meetings. And then Sandra, I appreciate your note in the chatter on not having received the agenda. We're still working on updating our list, so I'll make sure that you're on there for our future ones. And then finally, we throughout the process, you'll see that as we continue to develop SBEC meeting agendas, we're going to aim to continue to do what we have continue to execute on the practice of really trying to share kind of the variety of input we receive across stakeholders to the SBEC to represent kind of the diversity of perspectives and variety of input that we receive throughout our rulemaking process as appropriate. If you click to the next slide, here are our meeting dates for 2025. Really appreciate everyone who has taken all of our surveys and gave us really good input on what felt like an appropriate cadence and timing of these meetings. You should have received calendar invites. We will make sure that anyone who has registered for this meeting gets added to those calendar invites if you have not already. But we are planning, these times are really aimed to be far enough in advance of an upcoming SBEC meeting to help meaningfully inform any recommendations that are shared with the SBEC. Also really trying to thread the needle of opportunities with the State Board of Education as well. So really trying to find those sweet spots. We are going to ask again that folks register for each one of these meetings so that we've got that kind of full participant list on our end, and we can make sure that we're being as accurate as possible in our follow-ups. And then if you go to the next slide. All right. I think I might have just gotten a little side ping that Marilyn Cook is in the meeting space. Marilyn, I'm happy to keep rolling, or do you want to pick back up with focus topics? I see her a little bit hesitate. Oh.
No, I went over too. So I tickled myself, and thank you, boss, for doing the thing you do so well, picking up the baton and running when your negligent children are late to the party. I don't know where I went this morning in the world of virtual, but the Zoom gods not only said you must now reinstall Zoom and reset your password and do things. So my apologies for being so ultra tardy. These meetings, it's like church. You can't sneak in and not be seen. So I appreciate just kicking off the EPCE 2025 focus topics. This is not everything that we received, and they're in no particular order. But again, I think the spirit of this group is going to be that we're going to, throughout these opportunities to meet with you all, prioritize the things that we're going to be talking with, and that we can absolutely benefit from your great wisdom. So much more to come each meeting, materials to be sent to you in advance, agendas and all the things, so that we can make the best of these times together and grow and learn together. Wonderful. Petra, if you will, slide whisper, advance us to the next slide, if you don't mind. This again is a reflection of a lot of great work and thought from our colleagues in terms of how we hope and strive to show up moving forward at each of these meetings. So we've got a column on the TEA staff norms and expectations side, and one for our EPCE stakeholder norms and expectations. How we show up in these meetings matters. We're super excited about this opportunity and the rebranding for an EPCE stakeholder convening that is more robust and reflective and invites many to the table of conversation. So proof will be in the pudding, and we're going to be working really hard to live up to this new opportunity and hope that you plan to join us in this adventure. Much more to come. This would be the moment where you probably would have waited till the next meeting for me to have the cue the confetti sign to show again our excitement about all of you being here, but it is a privilege to be able to spend time with this group, and we very much look forward to future opportunities. While I was tardy, that is my last part of this, and I think I'll hand it back over to, I believe, my wonderful boss to give us some next highlights. Thank you all. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Marilyn. So as we move forward in subsequent meetings, we'll continue to reground in these norms and expectations and continue to hold each other accountable to them as well. And appreciate everyone who provided some really great input on these. I know we've workshopped them a lot, so your survey responses were really helpful in landing the plane on what we want to prioritize. But again, I think all norms and expectations are living documents. And so if there's additional things we need to, as a collective, come back together to add or refine, we're always happy to do that as well. With that, if we can transition to the next slide, want to kick off by doing a little bit of regrounding in actions that were contemplated and taken by the State Board for Educator Certification during their December 2024 meeting. So we had an opportunity to connect with the SBEC before the holidays, and they had a really rich and robust discussion around a number of really critical topics that many members that I see on the Zoom screen have leaned into for over the past year. So I'm excited to give some highlights if we go to the next slide. We had, just to quickly run through, we had 2 adoption items. One was Chapter 234, the Military Service Member Spouse and Military Veterans Rules. Again, this was to align with federal regulations. And then adopted the proposed amendments to Chapter 228. So again, these were those refinements to the rules coming out of the broader repeal and replacement the SBEC took action on earlier this year. So shout out to a lot of y'all who have leaned in deeply around that, provided us a ton of meaningful input that led to strong refinements to those rules. So those both passed unanimously at adoption. We also had an opportunity for the SBEC to approve the first cadre of continuing approval reviews for those EPPs that were up in this most recent 5-year cycle. With the next item, this was the first of a set of proposal items was Chapter 235, or Classroom Teacher Certification Standards. I'm going to turn it over to Beth because really these 3 proposal items that I'm going to have are the sort of the meat of the meeting. And so I'll turn over to Beth to share a little bit more around action that the SBEC took on 235.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Yep, so we brought the teacher pedagogy standards to the SBEC for the proposal item. This is following 3 discussions that began back in April, and the board continued to hear feedback from stakeholders around the standards themselves. There was one small change that was made to the standards that was to replace the word prioritize high quality instructional materials with emphasize high quality instructional materials. And this came through stakeholder feedback. So we were happy to make that change. And then the board passed this item through proposal. I also want to plug that these standards are now, as of today, going to be available for public comment period. I've been checking every 5 minutes or so the website to see if they've been posted yet. They have not, but I will put the link in the chat for you to easily click to there and read through the standards. So excited to hear what everyone thinks of them.
Thanks, Beth. And we will send in our kind of meeting follow-up access to the public comment links as well. If we go to the next slide, then I will turn it over to DeMarco, share a little bit more around our next proposal item, which was Chapter 231, our special education personnel assignments.
Good morning, everyone. So in December, at the December meeting, which I like to call the DeMarco SBEC version because it's my birthday month, the SBEC had an opportunity to continue their discussion around the proposed Chapter 231 subchapter F updates, which are related to special education personnel assignments. The board had actually been discussing this particular item for a little over a year. So they really dug deep into their conversation in October of 2023. At the meeting in December, the board normed on the worksheet, so the Texas-specific worksheet that will ultimately replace what we commonly know as House provisions. Again, with the whole intention of the updates to this rule text was to provide clarity for the field and maintain some flexibility for our special education teachers. So again, during this meeting, the board normed on the appropriate rule text to move forward, which ultimately provides that clarity to the field by specifying which portions of the new Texas-specific worksheet will apply to which teachers. And again, the board decided that only special education teachers of record will have to demonstrate some content competency there. At the meeting, the board also made some very small updates to the worksheet to again, under the kind of through line of providing that clarity and ensuring that folks who are generating points within the worksheet are able to do so in a fair way. So we're very excited about the movement with this particular item. And we did discuss with the board that staff is planning to provide the necessary kind of capacity building for the field to ensure that there's a smooth transition away from House and into these new rule updates.
Excellent. Thank you, DeMarco. The board also had an opportunity, before we get to our last proposal item, to approve the first group of Texas teacher residency preparation programs. So it was incredibly exciting. We had 15 EPPs that were approved in this first cohort. A few came to share about their programs, and there was an opportunity to celebrate during the meeting. And so we anticipate an extra preview for February, another tranche coming then. Sarah?
Yep. Happy Friday and good morning. So the board did propose revisions to Chapter 249, and public comment is open on this proposal as of today. The board had a very lively and interesting discussion on this. So we were very happy to see some of these changes come through and the discussion that the board has given us, because I believe this has been a discussion item since April 2024. So we were very happy to finally move this forward at proposal. So we're hoping to see what we hear in public comment and then move forward to adoption at the next meeting.
Thanks, Sarah, for saving me from my coughing attack there for a second. So we also, as we do at each meeting, walk through our disciplinary cases and then close the meeting with a discussion of our Chapter 235 bilingual special education certification standards, which we'll spend some time talking about today. I will pause there before we transition to the next topic. I know many of the things that were on the December agenda are also topics on today's agenda, but any clarifying questions from the group before we move on? Okay, then with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ali Friedlander and Ricky Harrell, who are going to talk more about statewide mentorship.
Hey, good morning, y'all. Excited to be here. Hope everybody's staying warm. And I'm here to bring some more information about the statewide mentorship training, officially named the Texas Mentorship Training. So we'll do a little quick recap of it now. I don't know if I have control of the slides.
Yeah, Petra's running the deck, Ricky, so she can move to, you can just tell her to move to.
Awesome, great. As we reviewed in December with the group, the Teacher Vacancy Task Force published its report a couple of years ago, and one of the places that they called for expansion was in mentorship of beginning teachers, new teachers, and teacher leadership. You can move on. Awesome. So with that, TEA has created the Texas Mentorship Training that's going to provide aligned system-wide training for all mentorship roles, because we know based on research that multi-year mentoring is one of the most effective ways to increase teacher retention and improve student outcomes through teacher effectiveness. So this Texas mentorship training will be an optional training for districts that they can join to support their pre and early service teachers. So the Texas mentorship training will provide training for all of the roles that support those pre and early service teachers, which includes mentor teachers of beginning teachers, teachers in their first and second years, and cooperating teachers, and also host teachers. There will also be separate pathways of training for EPP staff and field supervisors, and also another training for district and campus leaders that support those new baby teachers. So we can move on to the next one. I'll show you a little bit more of the structure of the training. So with the statewide mentorship training, we are rolling that out with a pilot of about 4 districts next year in 25-26, and it'll continue on into 26-27. And here's sort of the flow of the supports and training as it will come from our contractor US Prep through the ESCs onto the pathways that we'll be training in. So the US Prep is our contractor up there at the top. They're going to provide face-to-face sessions of training for those 4 to 5 pilot districts, as well as implementation support and one-on-one coaching and mentoring to these ESC fellows. So these ESC fellows will be staff members at each ESC that will be going through like ride-along training in next year in order to redeliver that training to their districts that sign up for TMT in the future in 26-27 and onward. So this bigger gray box is the one that I wanted to highlight. It's the same pathways as what you saw in the pyramid slide just a minute ago. And so there's pathway 1, which is the training that trains our teacher roles, so mentor teachers, cooperating teachers, host teachers. Pathway 2 is training specifically for our district and campus leaders. And so those district and campus leaders, they're really the linchpin in providing robust, high-quality mentorship programs in their districts. And so there will be a separate set of competencies to train these individuals on, as well as Pathway 3, which will be EPP staff and field supervisors with their own set of competencies. And all of this goes down to these 3 pathway roles supporting your pre-service teachers and your early service teachers. And then the next slide's got some timelines for the Texas mentorship training. So in November, December, we were able to execute a contract with US Prep to build out the Texas mentorship training. And they're working away in the spring semester to develop the trainings for Pathway 1, that teacher training, and Pathway 2, the district and campus leader training. And we should have that training created by May of 2025. In the school year 2025-2026, that's when US Prep is going to deliver the training of those 2 pathways to the pilot districts, along with those ESC fellow roles doing the ride along and getting trained up by US Prep in order to redeliver to districts in 26-27 and onward. So just a quick reminder, this is an optional training for districts. It's geared around supporting those roles that support pre and early service teachers. And I'm going to hand it over to Allie to give you some more information.
Thanks, Becky. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all again. We can move on to the next slide. One of the questions we got last time we met was around who TEA is working with and partnering with to build out this training. And I think I mentioned to you all that that we were in the final stages of executing our contracts. So we've partnered with Region 13. They're helping develop a website and a learning management system for these trainings. We do envision all these trainings happening face-to-face, but want to take advantage of all the capabilities with LMSs to ensure the best possible professional learning. They're also supporting overall project planning and implementation. They've run a subcontract, they ran an RFP process for someone to actually build out the training content. And we got several responses to that solicitation. And US Prep is our contractor, the subcontractor that will be developing the training content. They'll also be leading focus groups and a stakeholder advisory committee that I wanted to speak to you all about today. And then they will be working also with Education Service Center staff to re-deliver the training. On the next slide, just a preview of kind of where we're going. We've got some upcoming SFC stakeholder meetings. So in February through May, as US Prep is working on building out the training content for those first two pathways, the mentors, cooperating, and host teachers, and then also district and campus leaders. We'd love to bring to you all updates on that training development and as needed questions for input. So we envision continuing to do that throughout the spring. Next school year, US Prep will work on building out some of that EPP and field supervisor training. So we hopefully will stay in contact with you all through that next year's development as well. And then June 13th, we envision we'll have pretty solid content for those first two pathways that Ricky talked about. So we'd love to bring that back in the June meeting and then talk about further stakeholder opportunities for the upcoming school year. On the next slide, I did want to share a little bit around the Stakeholder Advisory Committee that we are co-planning with US Prep. It really is this Stakeholder Advisory Committee that would operate outside of this specific group, would be a collaborative group established to guide and enhance the development of this comprehensive mentor-teacher training, the competencies and the training for the state. And we are really, by leveraging the expertise and insights of education professionals, this committee will ensure that the training aligns with state goals and effectively support individuals in mentorship and system leadership roles in fostering excellence for new educators. So definitely excited to try to recruit some of you all that might be interested in joining this committee. On the next slide, we'll see some of the goals of this committee. There's a lot of text on the slide, but really at a high level, backwards design, we're always starting with competencies or what we want training or professional learning attendees to what skills and knowledge we want them to develop. So this committee will refine training competencies, provide constructive feedback on training materials, and then really champion high quality mentorship across the state. On the next slide, we've got a few benefits. There's in some commitments. So I'll just, we've been talking a lot. I'll pause for a second and let y'all read through some of that text. So hopefully y'all are seeing some of these benefits to participation, influencing the future state of mentorship across Texas, collaborating across different regions of the state and people from different backgrounds and sets of experiences. Then obviously recognition for the hard work that you would all put in. In terms of commitments, I will share some dates and time commitments on the next slide, but really the vision, part of the vision for the Stakeholder Advisory Committee is that we could really dive into some of the training content development in these FC stakeholder meetings. We've got a couple hours every few months and lots of topics to get to. So we're hoping that this separate committee could really dive deeper into content. So if that speaks to you, we'd love for you to express interest and really provide through those meetings. You'd be providing feedback. So we are looking for individuals that could commit to the full participation, given kind of, when you have these sorts of meetings, like knowledge builds on itself. So that is an important piece. On the next slide, here are the dates for this advisory committee for this school year. The first one is just a couple of weeks away. It's 3 hours in virtual. And then we've got 2 days in February and 2 days in March. That would be at Education Service Center 13 in Austin. Travel would be covered if any of you would be traveling from out of town, and you can see kind of the topics there that we would dive into for each of these meetings. All right, so if you all are interested, let me see if I can successfully copy this link. I will drop an interest form. It's really quick. It just asks for your contact information and just a little bit about interest in the group. I will also drop in here a Google Doc that is a one-page overview of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. It's really the same information that we had on these slides, just summarized into a page or two. So if you are interested in serving on this advisory committee and can attend all sessions, we are asking that you complete that form by this Monday, the 13th. And then someone from TEA or US Prep would reach out to you by midweek next week to confirm space. We are looking for 10 to 15 committee participants. So if we get a ton of interest, we might not be able to move forward with everyone. You all know sometimes the bigger the group is, the harder it is to get everyone's voices included, but we'll definitely continue to provide updates and solicit input through this group with that structure. Thanks, Donna, for the question. Yes, feel free to share with others for sure. It's kind of a quick turnaround, but we appreciate that. Yeah, see how we are fighting over everyone. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I missed. Any questions? I want to be sensitive to time because I know we have a ton of topics to cover today, but any questions on the next slide? Not that we need a slide to ask about, but you have questions. Yeah, we are recruiting through different channels as well. Thank you for that question, Kelsey. Yes, we are hoping to have, Donna, a question about site supervisors and field supervisors. Our hope is to have a diverse group of representation from different critical roles. And then we'll kind of also, as we get into the training for the pathway around EPPs and field supervisors, which would start next year, we might modify the group as well to make sure that we've got the right representation. This year, we're really working on building out that mentor, cooperating teacher, host teacher, and district path, those two pathways. And then the following school year, we'll work on building out the EPP side. So the membership might look a little different. Well, thank you all for your time. On the next slide, and when we send this out, you'll see my email address and Ricky's email address. Definitely feel free to reach out if you've got questions to one of us, and so appreciative of your time here.
Thanks, Allie and Ricky. If we go to the next slide, I think our next focus topic, I'll turn it over to with Mark Olson and Jeremy Landa.
Hey everybody, good to see everybody here. Joining the call to provide a little bit of an update and preview on our EPP data stakeholder work group. So on the next slide, you might be asking yourself, what's an EPP data stakeholder work group? That's a grand question. So the EPP data stakeholder work group, which has functioned under a sort of a family of really related names over the past 6 or 7 years, consists of stakeholders who are interested in and oriented to EPP data and ACEP, that's our accountability system, ACEP calculation topics. So this group has met once, maybe twice a year, typically here in the late winter, early spring, in order to just surface any topics from the field that staff can then put together and gather feedback and bring to the board. So while we do have an existing list that we've worked off of for several years at this point, we want to make sure kind of with this updated EPCE stakeholder group to also invite interested members from this group to attend that meeting. So on our next slide, before everybody lines up, I want to make sure folks understand what they might be getting themselves into. So prior meetings of this stakeholder group have shaped, for example, the way that we evaluate and score the principal survey and teacher survey, kind of into the weeds on the statistics and the mathematics there. They've provided information on and feedback on how we report or how programs report clinical experiences into the educator certification online or EGOS system. Provided information about the Insights Impact dashboard, those are the EPP facing dashboards, that context, and also how the index works for our accountability system. This year, based on what we've heard both from stakeholders over the past year and the board, We think we've got some topics to talk through, including the small group aggregation procedure in the accountability system, our indicator 3 standard, reporting issues in ECOS, and then exploring the idea of an ACEP index minimum. So some meaty, but again, kind of into the weeds topics, which is kind of key to where this stakeholder or where the data work group lands. So finally, on the next slide here, our next meeting is Thursday, February 20th at 2 p.m. If you would like to receive an invite to that online meeting, please go ahead, just shoot me an email before next Friday. I should have done what Allie did and made a form. That was really cool. Instead, I'm just going to ask you to shoot me an email and we will get you added here. I do want to note that in order to be able to like really participate in this stakeholder group, we assume that the folks showing up are familiar with the ACEP manual, with ACEP calculations, and with the larger accountability system, sort of like technically how it works. We do not take time in these meetings to like dive into how it works. Rather, we kind of like take that as assumed knowledge and then move forward. I also want to note that typically we do ask folks who are involved for pre-work and post-work. So typically provide some readings or data findings prior to the meeting. That's why we want to make sure we have a good list of who's going to be there. And then following that meeting, we may ask folks, especially if they were providing sort of a deeper look at specific statistical findings around to be able to provide some post-work as well to be able to further allow us to make robust recommendations. So it's just noting it is for some, maybe not for everybody, but if this is the sort of thing that you feel oriented around and would like to get added to, please do shoot me an email there. I'd say one more thing. We did email out a few days ago to the people who are currently on our list for this data work group. So if you already received that email, you're good to go. You don't need to email us again. This would be just if you hadn't previously received that. I think that's all I've got on our data stakeholder work group meeting, and I'm grateful to get to join.
Thanks, Mark. Transitioning on, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa or Allie. Oh, Allie's off.
Allie.
Go ahead.
Awesome. Yes, you can go to the next slide. I just wanted to let everybody know that we are having a webinar on understanding the research-based instructional strategies, or as we like to say here at TEA, RBIS, not the place that you go to get fast food. We don't have the meats. We have the research-based instructional strategies. And ultimately, it's a webinar geared for EPP leadership, but anybody is welcome to attend. Feel free to register. I'll put the registration link in the chat. Let me make sure it does that, if I can copy and paste it. And ultimately, we're hopeful that most people will show up. You'll learn a little bit more about how the RBs actually coincide with our high quality instructional materials and how we have developed those research-based instructional strategies. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and I'll get that link posted in the chat to register. Perfect.
Thanks, Allie. Just stamp this is a broader set of training resources and supports that are really aimed at supporting the field in implementation of the House Bill 1605 requirement around integration of open education resources into educator preparation program instruction. And so again, really I know when we talked to folks at CSOD, many programs were really interested in having guidance around where to get started. What were some of the resources that are made available to K-12 school districts across the state? And so these research-based instructional strategies inform kind of the foundation of a lot of the training that's provided to teachers and leaders across the state. And so I want to make sure that EPPs also have access to that same training content. And I think that's actually a good segue. I'm going to turn it over to the next topic to Beth, who's going to kind of share about additional training and guidance.
Yes, thank you. Speaking of House Bill 1605, getting started, resources, and webinars. We have a webinar coming up on Monday. This is available for EPPs. It's around legislation, specifically 1605, the pedagogy standards that I mentioned earlier that have just gone through proposal, and then EPP and LEA partnerships. So if you can go to the next slide, I'll just give you a quick overview. So yes, it will be us, Dallas College, and Richardson ISD. Those two have a really strong EPP-LEA partnership that they've leveraged to implement some changes to their programs. So they're going to be there to talk about how to use those partnerships to get started with implementing things like RBIS, HQIM implementation, the requirements that are laid out in House Bill 1605. So we will give an overview of those legislative requirements. We'll talk about how they're specified and where they show up in the standards. And then some key shifts that you'll see when you're reviewing these standards, both in the structure and the content of these teacher pedagogy standards. And then we will hand over a lot of the time to hear from and ask questions of this partnership between Dallas College and Richardson ISD. I have the link here. You do have to register. And we are opening it up to EPPs. We will record this webinar and then post it and share it widely as well. So if you're not able to make it, you will have the chance to watch this webinar. And I am going to pass it over to DeMarco and Kelly next.
Hello again, everyone. So Kelly and I have the pleasure of kind of leading you through a conversation around the bilingual special education standards. Before going into the next slide, do want to name here that our intention here is to kind of provide a high-level context of where the standards came from, what they include, and then we'll kind of throw the mic out there to the group to provide feedback on those standards, as we are planning to go into the February SBEC meeting with these standards as a discussion item again. So in the next slide, as I shared, our goal is to provide some context here. So really the bilingual special education certification standards are a result of HB 2256, which came out of the 87th legislative session in 2021. This specific legislation requires the SBEC to implement a new bilingual special education educator certificate, really with the intent to ensure that there are teachers with this really unique specialized training in providing instruction to students of limited English proficiency with disabilities. And as you've been perusing those standards, you probably noticed the term duly identified. The bill also specifies that candidates must complete coursework with skills-based course of instruction on providing instructions to students of limited English proficiency with disabilities. And so this particular certificate will not be offered as cert by exam, meaning that a candidate will have to go through a preparation program in order to achieve the certificate. The section that is identified here on the screen really outlines the eligibility and instructional requirements for the certificate and ultimately serves as the foundation for the draft standards that you see here. So we thoroughly discussed this context with the SBEC at the December meeting, and also named that the SBEC had seen a first draft of the standards previously. With that, I will hand it over to Kelly, who's been leading the work with the committee in drafting these standards and can speak on a lot more of what the standards contain in the work that the committee has done.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. So like DeMarco mentioned, I've had the sort of pleasure of working with this Educator Standards Advisory Committee over the past few years or so. And on the next slide, there's just a high-level overview of the work that this committee is engaged in since the fall of 2022. So you can see here, there was that initial discussion of these standards presented to the SBEC in February, and then you'll see through the spring of 2023 into the spring of 2024, the standards did go through a series of sort of internal review and revision, really with the goal of making sure that the standards were aligned to some other guidance coming out from other parts of the agency, most importantly, a technical assistance guide for our duly identified students. So that happened during that time period. Then in this past summer and fall, committee members had a chance to review the updated draft of the standards that you all have. They did their final review this fall, and then they were discussed again by the SBEC in December. On the next slide, high-level overview of the organization of the standards themselves. So you'll see they're organized into 6 standard groups. Really here, just aligning with a range of priority skills, knowledge that the sort of unique educator is going to need. So our bilingual special educator, their standards are laid out in these 6 standard groups here. And then you all had a chance to review the standards themselves in the pre-work. So on the next slide, I'm happy to hear any feedback questions that are coming up for you all as you had a chance to review. And then I'll also drop DeMarco and I's contact information in the chat too, if you'd like to share any written feedback for us.
Yep, can we go back one slide, just to keep that as the anchor? Back, Patrick. Thank you. Oh, no, the other direction. So we can look at. Thank you, yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely open it up if folks want to come off mute, as you've had a chance to review the standards, anything that stands out to folks. Happy to lean in and have any discussion. Or if folks have any clarifying questions.
I have a quick question regarding so I read over it and so whenever they says bilingual special education standards, so there's no particular specificity on the bilingualness of that particular candidate. So if it's an Spanish speaking bilingual, Vietnamese speaking bilingual, Korean speaking bilingual, so there's no particular specificity. This is a general bilingual special education.
That's correct.
Okay. I asked the question because, of course, in some bilingual programs, there are other ties to, for example, Chapter 89 in the code. So I don't know where would that be connected to this? Are they connected? Do they speak to each other? In other words, the Chapter 89 with this particular one?
Yes, that's a great question. And Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but the information in Chapter 89, the rules in Chapter 89, of course, are used as a foundation for these standards, because these standards also acknowledge the bilingual Spanish standards that are in Chapter 235 as well. So there's alignment across the rule chapters, but to your point, these standards are general enough to kind of encompass, the world of the wide world of different language speakers. But we, Kelly, I think she can speak on it much better than I can, but and the committee, we're very intentional around not kind of creating a silo for one particular language, recognizing that there could be duly identified students across the kind of language spectrum.
Yeah, DeMarco, that's correct. You took the words out of my mouth. So the committee, it really was a priority of the committee to ensure that, of course, like the legislation itself is language agnostic, but that the pedagogy and the skills that are embedded within the standards are applicable to bilingual educators, sort of regardless of that other language of instruction. And so that's what you should see across the standards.
Awesome. Thank you.
I saw the question in the chat around, is this a new certification for bilingual educators? This is also a question that, a similar question that we were asked during the SBEC meeting around essentially what would be the implementation of the certificate and who would seek it. So the intention, of course, with this certificate is to ensure that there are teachers who can serve these students who, of course, are duly identified. So potentially we are looking at this as an option for bilingual educators. So a teacher would ultimately have to achieve a bilingual certification. To Jamil's point, they would have to demonstrate language proficiency in the language of their choice. before, of course, achieving this bilingual special education certification. So of course, we're in the draft stages here, but that is sort of the intention behind this draft pathway.
I'm probably going off the deep end asking a question, but it's just a personal, something I've been looking at closely too, is there any consideration for, with the context we're in now, considering technology standards, knowing that educators are some kind of adept at using certain technological advancements to assist students in their learning through their certification programs?
I think that's a good question. I won't oversell because Beth, my boss, is on the call. But I think that's something that we've also been thinking about. And as Beth shared, the teacher pedagogy standards do include legislation related to technology. So there is mention of skills related to technology, and really the teacher's responsibility in kind of honing and sharpening those skills. So there's stuff there. But I think that's on our brains too, especially as we think about like AI and what's the teacher's responsibility and kind of utilizing those tools within the school setting.
Thank you.
And DeMarco and Kelly, just a consideration for the future and to Beth, as this moves forward into the actual getting set for the test and all that kind of stuff. I think it's important to understand the amount of testing that a bilingual educator receives in the state of Texas already. So that particular understanding, I think, is important to have in mind as this moves forward.
Jamil, I appreciate that comment. I think that's part of, I know the SBEC's focus has been on where there are opportunities to streamline where appropriate. And so know that, in kind of testimony while this legislation was being considered, et cetera, I know that there was a nod towards specialized skills, but also streamlining them as well. And so wanting to make sure we're keeping that at the forefront of our minds. I see some visuals and charts in our futures around different pathways and options that folks can go down and sort of choose your own adventure on how to become a fantastic bilingual educator.
I had a question or comment after reviewing the document that was sent before the meeting. Kind of curious why, if in Texas, we kind of go above and beyond what's required in IDEA sometimes, like audio recordings or translation of documents into native language. In the section where we talked about IDEA, Plyler versus Doe, some of those federal guidelines, there's no reference to Texas statutes about requirements of native language documents or other things that might be above and beyond some of those federal requirements. I'm wondering if that was done on purpose or if we could look at adding a reference to some of the Texas codes about those requirements.
That's a good flag. So are you thinking in the Group 1 legal and ethical guidelines, there may be, an opportunity to incorporate some additional language there?
Correct, that B1 section, right?
B1. Yeah, so the majority of the standards in that section are sort of just identical to our special education standards, but I think to your point, given the sort of unique nature of who this individual is, if there's an opportunity to incorporate some more specific language, I can definitely bring that back share that feedback with the committee, and we can see what else we sort of need to build out in that section. Thank you so much for flagging that for us.
Thank you.
Other reflections, questions, points of clarification, y'all?
This is Donna, not necessarily about the standards, but I'm wondering, will programs have to apply for this certificate?
That's a good question, Donna. Yes, programs will have to apply for this certificate because it will be a completely new certification pathway.
Sorry, one other thing. In thinking through G at the very bottom of the document, it looks like there are some really good references to different resources that we might have in the state. One thing that I think we at Disability Rights Texas would like to see these educators knowledgeable about are statewide resources for parents, the legal advocacy options for parents to receive some advocacy services and support if they have questions or concerns about the provision of services for their kiddos.
Thank you so much for flagging that. I also made note of that to take back to the committee so we can chat with them about that too. Thank you so much.
Teacher wait time was my favorite skill to practice. So I think in the essence of time, if folks don't have additional comments on the standards or other clarifying questions, we'll move on. Kelly dropped our email addresses into the chat. So if you have a document and you make comments on it and you were shy about sharing it today, please email over your comments. Kelly's going to continue that work with the committee because again, we're returning in February with a discussion item, but appreciate the thoughtfulness and the commentary shared within this group. All right, we can move on. And the next slide. Okay, so we're gonna end this section out with a bang. We're excited to share an update related to the Texas Specific Teacher Performance Assessment Grant on the next slide. Woo, I'm so excited. Okay, so first things first, the grant is right around the corner. So as many of you are aware, our SBEC has decided to move forward with the development of a Texas-specific teacher performance assessment as a certification exam. And previously, we discussed with the SBEC that the agency would lead efforts to identify preparation programs, to really identify a team of EPPs who would work to develop this assessment. In all intents and purposes, this will be a Texas developed assessment, right? So EPPs will lead the charge here, and I want to make that very clear. And as part of that, we are providing grant funds to kind of drive the development of that assessment, starting with this first grant, which is the Texas Test of Educator Proficiency EPP Development Team Selection, Onboarding, and Training Grant. It's a mouthful, but that's because it does encompass a huge foundation in the development process of this assessment. You'll notice that there has been an updated name for the assessment. So again, the Texas Test of Educator Proficiency, otherwise known as the TTEP. We love a good acronym here, and we think that this one sounds pretty good. It also, again, we want to make sure that it's clear that this is a Texas-specific assessment. We have heard feedback from the field that folks are worried that this will just be a TPA with a cowboy hat on. And that is not the case here. We want to ensure that this assessment is made specifically for our Texas educators with our Texas students in mind. This grant opportunity will be open to not-for-profit educator preparation programs, and really is an opportunity for us to identify the 6 to 8 educator preparation programs that will then each select one faculty or staff member to serve on the assessment development team. The funds provided within this grant, will be for those folks identified to serve on this team to complete their virtual and in-person onboarding and training requirements. But as part of this grant, there is language that outlines stipulations for continued funding in the 25-26 and 26-27 years. So folks, once that application comes out, we want for folks to read that language carefully so that our EPPs are aware of how the folks who are identified will continue to receive funds as they continue to do work and develop this assessment. Now, the grant launches next Wednesday, January 15th. That is right around the corner. And all applications will be due by Monday, March 17th. This grant will be linked in our EPP newsletter. You'll have the link to the grant, which will include the timeline for FAQ submission, and also a timeline for the grant webinar and how to submit questions for that webinar as well. Similar to all of our important updates, we will continue to update the field using that EPP newsletter. But again, once the application comes out, if folks have questions about the application or the process in general, then you are allowed to submit questions for that before that FAQ is published. But we do want to be careful here because after the FAQ is published, it's very hard for staff to answer questions about this application, kind of given our grant laws and structures. So I think I've said a lot. I hope I did not let my excitement get ahead of me, but I will pause there to see if there are any questions. And if not, we can move on.
Like no questions, Margo.
No questions? Okay.
All right. Thank you, team. Then I believe I'm going to turn it over to Melissa to talk more about the EPF and the continuing approval review.
Thanks, Jessica. Great to see everyone today. And DeMarco, you do have excellent wait time. So we're going to take a look at progress and updates. Really exciting today for the redesign of the continuing approval review. Today, Marilyn is also co-presenting with me. I think folks know or may not know, I think we've all been in denial, but Dr. Edvini Love has left us for a great career opportunity. But the good news is Ebony and I still talk daily. So it's kind of like, she doesn't work for me, but I get to talk to her daily. So there's that. So Marilyn and I will be co-presenting this update today. So we've got a lot of progress to report and some stakeholder trends to report as well from the feedback that folks have engaged in, many in this room. So we're very grateful for that. So I will turn it over to Marilyn to get us started.
Thanks a lot, Melissa, and wonderful, Petra. If you can go to the next slide. Thanks so much. I agree with Melissa. I'm in denial about almost Dr. Love being gone, but I do also hear from her daily. So it's like having your good friend and colleague still connected with you. So that's a real blessing. And the rest of our team that's been having the opportunity to work on EPF and CAR is still here. And so it's a nice collaboration to keep that great work going. This first slide's been an important anchor slide that we've talked about for some time. You all may remember way back, seems like so long ago, in 2023, we started conversations about the importance of EPF and its foundational role in already impacting the changes that many of you were helpful in getting across the finish line with 228, and we will continue to utilize the EPF. I think it's important in three areas worth noting on this slide that are color-coded. The arrow is currently on the redesign of the continuing approval review process that Melissa and I will be excited to give you a few more highlights about. As we progress in this work, we're also excited about the opportunity that use of the EPF and other great resources will continue to play in us vetting some third-party technical assistance and professional service providers to add more resources and support to the field. And then finally, when we're a little bit further down the road, we're also ecstatic about the potential to be able to update EPP commendations to recognize once again and highlight the great work that many of our partners in work are doing to prepare exceptional candidates for the classroom. Petra, with that, if you don't mind advancing to our next slide, please. So as we've been talking with you all and many others about some key areas of focus and our goals and priorities for redesigning the continuing approval review, these three big things come to mind immediately. We're in the process of the quality review components that are aligned to the EPF. We're going to be continuing in this first pilot year developing those rubrics and piloting. We've got 5 amazing partners in work that are stepping out there with us in year 1 of the pilot: Dallas ISD, Texas Wesleyan, ESC Region 5, West Texas A&M University, and Texas State. So we will be tapping the wisdom of those great programs, and TEA staff will be on site along with our partners in this adventure, TPI-US, boots on the ground, working closely and spending quality time with those programs, their candidates, to learn and explore and to continue to build on this great work in pilot year 1, which will then be able to inform pilot year 2. This last box here, the recruitment and training of Texas reviewers, I'm grateful that I was one of many of our staff who were able to be together with some of you who are on this call today and others for a training in Dallas. And I will tell you, when I saw the snow in Dallas, I'm so glad that the training was last month and not this month. And I wasn't trying to travel there and get there for training now. But it was an action-packed full 3 days of training. Lots of great opportunities for feedback and information that will inform the pilots this year and continue informing the development of the work related to redesigning the continuing approval review. Petra, if you will hit the next slide for me, please, ma'am, when you have a chance. So this is the animation slide that is here to, one, make Marilyn slow down so she doesn't fly through these. But in pilot year 1, as I mentioned, those 5 wonderful programs across the state who are working with us on this particular process. We're excited to get it started probably in just another week or so. We will be engaging in our first round of piloting Dallas ISD with Texas Wesleyan soon to follow. We're excited about the fact that this is one of those focus topics that I believe Melissa and I and others will have opportunities to continue to keep this group updated on our progress in this work each time as well. So it's excellent that across those 5 meetings that are scheduled for EPCE, we'll be able to share updates with you as appropriate as this work progresses. Petra, if you hit that wonderful slide one more time, the navigation should hopefully cruise me through to a nice place. I kind of hit on this a little bit. Our goal is really going to be with our programs and with TPI-US, we're learning. It is a pilot. It is a true pilot in the sense of we're preparing some things. We're going to be asking for feedback, learning, reflecting, and improving. It's critical to all of us in this work to make sure that before we roll something out that has implications for programs and all of us, that we've done thoughtful pilot and had the time to look and see the things that are working and to take the opportunities to revise and improve in other areas. Petra, if you don't mind, one more time, should talk about pilot year 2. So there will be a second pilot. And while we started small and smartly with 5 programs, pilot 2, we're excited about the ability to sort of expand opportunities for more programs to be involved in this pilot across the state, to continue to make sure that we have diversity and representation of programs, program pathways, types, and program candidates. Petra, one more time on that button. I know I'm wearing your fingers out. There's a lot action packed into this slide. We, in terms of just a spoiler alert, we are going to more than likely begin the recruitment for pilot year 2 about summer of 2025. So as we are hopefully, fingers crossed, finishing up an exciting legislative session, we lead into even more opportunities and action-packed opportunities moving into the next year. Petra, if you don't mind, if you will advance us to the next slide. We've talked a lot across this team in all of our work, the importance of partnership and working together on topics such as this. So you'll see these 4 prongs kind of give a nod to the work that has been done to date and continues to be done to make sure that this is a collaborative effort, that we have opportunities to make sure that we're slowing down enough to share information, to get feedback, to react and revise and continuously improve across the process. In November of 2024, we got applications, and you'll remember we talked about our cups runneth over, and we were richly blessed with a level of interest in this work. We've continued to mention this redesign process in places like CSOT. We already had people coming up after that talking about if there's opportunity for year 2 of the pilot, we would like to be involved, and how can we do it? Keep us in mind. Make sure we share the information early enough for you to do it. Our commitment in December with that first opportunity for training, again, we were richly blessed there. There were a lot of folks interested in participating in the training. We were able to select about 30 applicants in this round 1 training, but there will be opportunities again if you weren't selected this first time to look into this and participate in training, probably in the June, July of 2025 timeframe. We will continue to keep this group posted on our progress with that work. I think that the last little icon here, we're going to continue to be, as we're piloting, looking and seeking feedback, collecting data, observing, talking with a lot of people. What is working? What is making sense? Where do we have opportunities to improve? Some of the things that came up in the training, which are important things that our partners in this work at preparation programs mentioned repeatedly, the importance of understanding how this impacts programs, the importance of cost, the importance of timelines to implement changes. All of those things did not fall on deaf ears during that training. We took copious notes as TEA staff have been back and had several conversations already. We'll continue to be engaging in those thoughtful conversations with TPI US and you as time goes on and we progress through this experience of the pilot. And lastly, I mean, I think it says it all with the people holding up the last circle. It's important that all of us are together and working together in this work. It indeed takes a village to do anything like this, right? To move the needle on this process. And we're just excited about the opportunity and grateful to so many of you who are on this call today for your continued partnership and your feedback and your collaboration and your willingness to keep coming to the table and hanging in there with us and partnering with us in this work. With that, Melissa Yoder is kinder to me than she should ever be. She lets me get started, and it's time for me to pause, and you can now hear her wonderful melodic voice. But I thank you for the time and the space to share some updates with you today.
No, thank you, Marilyn, for being a great partner in the work overall, but also a partner in presenting on the updates. It's really exciting. And I just want, as I head into, on the next slide, getting a little bit into the stakeholder and communication engagement. Marilyn, you did an amazing job describing the Texas Reviewer training. And I think another thing that stuck with me that's also true for our composite of stakeholders who we've been working with is that they are coming from leadership spaces from across entities. We have district leaders, EPP leadership, other professionals from organizations that have a lens into what quality preparation looks like and sounds like. So we saw that both in our reviewer pool and in the pool of stakeholders who come forth to support us in providing some robust feedback even early on, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. And many of those folks who supported also came from this group of stakeholders, our EPCE stakeholder group. So we are, again, just grateful to y'all for showing up in so many ways to provide us the critical feedback and support, whether it's serving as a pilot, a reviewer, or providing that on the ground feedback on the products. So just kind of like anchoring in this anchor slide around our stakeholder communication and engagement strategy, we had like a 3-pronged approach centering on stakeholder feedback sessions on key products and policy. Quick update here. November of 2024, we engaged multiple stakeholders, as I noted already, in actually 4 sessions. We had an additional makeup session because we wanted to make sure we could capture everyone to gather input on the initial rubrics. We'll look at that in a second. And then finally, in this area, we are going to be releasing some timely communication about additional opportunities in late spring 25 through the fall. And I'll pop out that conversation at the end of this section. Area 2, we're still going to continue to prioritize key convenings for broader communication. Marilyn mentioned that how we kind of launched and got things started at CSOT in October of 2024. And we'll continue to bring this as a standing topic to our EPCE stakeholder group. And then we are also looking to coordinate with organizational groups around other EPP convenings and other relevant school system opportunities heading into the spring. So more to come there too. And if you are in charge of such events and you would like to bring us on board to provide some updates and engagement, we would love you to contact us. And then, of course, as we engage in the pilots, plural, we're going to be able to learn so much about exemplar practices that our programs are already doing. That's the part I'm frankly most excited about, and be able to showcase those for y'all too. So all of this is to say, there's a lot of communication and a lot of engagement to come. You can head to the next slide. Awesome, thank you. Okay, so getting into this first area of stakeholder engagement around the rubrics for the continuing approval review. So our stakeholders gathered in those 4 sessions to provide feedback on key review areas in the draft rubrics with the ultimate goal of making sure that the tool can do what it's supposed to do, right? That's going to provide the right and substantive feedback to EPPs in a quality review that's meaningful, that's going to help them to identify the areas they need to identify to continue to improve practice. So before I get into the trends that we surfaced just in this first initial round, remember there will be more rounds, I just wanted to contextualize what we're talking about first, because I think it's hard to talk about feedback without actually looking at the thing. So here is a snapshot that we've consolidated to one slide, so you may need to expand your window a little bit and zoom in. But it outlines here the components that exist in each of the review areas. The rubric is comprised of the 5 key EPF aligned review areas, and those are as follows. The quality of program performance management, EPP leadership and planning, that first area. Second area is the quality of selection, focusing on that talent recruitment and management. The third area is the quality of program partnerships, those partnerships between EPPs and their school system partners. Fourth area, also very important, quality of content knowledge and teaching methods, the curriculum focus. And then finally, the 5th area is the quality of clinical placement, feedback, and candidate performance, and that pertains to instruction and support. So this snapshot here is one of the review area 1. On the left-hand side, you can see that it's laid out with the 4 big criteria across the top for this review area, an essential question for each of those, and an overarching guiding question that helps us to really focus what it is we're looking for this entire review area when we put all the pieces together. It also lays out the data sources, the evidence pieces that are likely to be collected. On my right-hand side here, we have an excerpt of the actual rubric itself for the first criteria, vision, mission, and guiding principles. Here you can see next to it, you have the criteria descriptors for that criteria and the aligned ratings. The idea is that our reviewers will use this tool as they're gathering their triangulated data sources, whether they're looking at aligned artifacts to that area, observations, interviews, etc., putting that data together, looking at the evidence presented, and making recommendations around where the preponderance of evidence of that data sits in terms of these ratings. And that will help and provide that feedback and input to the program about whether this may or may not be an area overall where they might want to be focusing. When they look at the review area as a whole, they'll put together each of these criteria and then get a full preponderance of evidence across all those areas. So a really helpful look at the quality of practice and what success has already been attained, and then where they have to grow, because everyone is growing. This is an aspirational process and framework. Go to the next slide. Alrighty, so to the good stuff. As we worked with stakeholders and gathered their input on the review areas, now this is like an overall trend analysis. We got lots of very specific feedback, which our vendor has basically coordinated and put into a one solid document. But when we looked across it, here are some of the things that really stuck out as areas for us, for our vendor and us to like be conscientious of and make sure that we're addressing heading into the first pilot. One of the areas that frequently came up from stakeholders and even from our reviewers who went through the training was around this idea of making sure that we're really defining those qualifying terms. If we say things like frequently or consistently in the rubric, do they mean the same thing? What are those definitions? So one fix the vendor is working on currently is developing a glossary of terms to make sure that we have a shared understanding of what these qualifiers mean. The second area is that we lifted out was defining data sources and evidence. Similarly, when we write down an item as a potential data source on the rubric, does everyone know what that means, right? Like, do we all have a shared understanding of what that source is? So our vendor is checking across for some of that consistency and making sure we have a clear understanding of those. And then also being able to communicate to programs and to reviewers that EPPs will go through a pre-work process where they would have opportunities to ask and to learn more and to understand and make sure that they truly understand what it is we are asking for in this process. The third area that surfaced that is pretty important is around ensuring that the rubric is universally applicable across programs and preparation routes offered. One area I know folks in this room provided feedback on as well, for example, was pertaining to review area 5 when we were looking at the criteria around extended pre-service practice. And we received some incredible feedback on how to make sure that that indicator or that criteria area was applicable across programs and preparation routes. So thank you. Hats off to y'all for catching that. That's just one example, but there were several others as well. And then y'all also emphasized time and time again, and we could not agree more, that we want to make sure that this rubric prioritizes the program's evidence around preparing teachers to educate all students. And since this is coursework that educates all students is one of the criteria of review area 4 curriculum, we just want to make sure that the field knows. It's really important for us to hear this because it's important for the field to know that this is a priority of this review. And we want to make sure too that the criteria descriptors are getting down to addressing, preparing teachers to address the needs of our students in our special population. So really appreciated hearing that from folks as well. And then finally, y'all have laser-like eyes. So we got a lot of good notes around, here's some areas for clarity, readability, to address as well, just to make sure that this is crystal clear to programs as they're reviewing, and it really sets a clear roadmap for where they are headed. So again, I cannot articulate enough the appreciation for folks in this room and others outside of this space who were recruited to join this process. And speaking of which, we'll move to the next slide. The engagement and opportunities will only continue. As Marilyn noted earlier, we are heading into that first pilot where we will engage with those 5 programs and learn a lot of lessons. Following that, we'll have an opportunity to debrief. So in June, we'll have the opportunity to debrief the first pilot learnings with you all at large. And then we'll be able to make some early updates to that second draft rubric and be able to engage with this group and the others for input on those high priority areas. And then finally, as noted before, we'll be looking for input as we head into drafting policy for implementation of the redesign CAR. So two big pieces, two big feedback and engagement opportunities really on the horizon, probably in pretty close succession with lots of opportunities heading into the spring and fall. And I'll pause there. I see Marilyn Cook in the chat answering questions. We had a question about if an EPP scores low or is not producing. And then Marilyn had said that about as we're navigating this pilot, this will be something we work through in terms of what leads to a specific score. Exactly. And that will fall into this idea, this second area around input on draft policy for the implementation of the redesign CAR. So we are really looking to this pilot to lean on, helping us to understand the right approach there. Awesome, y'all. Any other questions? I know that's a lot of information. All right, y'all, my wait time's not as good as DeMarco, but if y'all have more questions, you know where to find us.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Marilyn. Petra, if we can go to the next slide. Oh, you can go back one. Thanks. So to close us out today, I wanted to give folks a preview of what we anticipate being on the February 2025 SBEC meeting agenda. I think, as you all know, our board chair, Chair Streepy, directs staff on the content of the agenda. So we're working on finalizing that, but there are a few topics that we certainly anticipate being on that agenda, and we will send out the agenda and materials to this group once it's posted publicly. A few things of note at the beginning of this meeting, the team provided an overview of 3 proposal items that the board took action on to approve at the December meeting that they kindly reinforced are now out for public comment. And again, we will send those public comment links to everyone as well. But those 3 items, that's Chapter 235, the classroom teacher standards, Chapter 231, those special education personnel assignments, and Chapter 249, our educator discipline and sanction rules, will all be at the adoption stage. So the board will consider those 3 adoption items. We also anticipate, as we do annually each February, we will be bringing to the board for their approval the accountability ratings and accreditation statuses of our Texas preparation programs. So this will be reflective of this last year's ASEP cycle and will be the formal issuance of those accreditation statuses. We also do anticipate, as I signaled earlier, to bring an additional group of educator preparation programs who've been reviewed and are being recommended to the SBEC for approval of the Texas Teacher Residency Preparation Route. And then finally, as DeMarco and Kelly named, we appreciate the input we received on the Chapter 235G bilingual special education standards, and look forward to making refinements to those and bringing those back to the SBEC for another robust discussion before we move forward in the rulemaking process. So those are some topics that are currently slated for February, but again, we will continue to refine the agenda in the coming weeks, and we'll be in pretty consistent communication with you all related to those things. I want to just name, before I open up for general questions, just want to express appreciation for everyone that joined today. Thank you. If this was your first time joining this EPCE stakeholder group and you maybe felt like you were drowning in acronym soup, I thank y'all for sticking with us, and we'll continue to make sure that we are leaning in and setting some of the background context for the work as we go forward. I know today was pretty update heavy, a lot of previewing stakeholder engagement for this year to come. That's intentional to make sure we're really clear about all the ways that we can communicate and engage as a team and collaborate. But we will continue to anticipate opportunities to go deeper into meaningful topics during this specific stakeholder time as well. So looking forward to continued collaboration in the new year. And as the team is named, we're open and available. If any of these topics you want to reach out and talk with us more about, we are always open and available. With that, Petra, if you wouldn't mind switching to the last slide. Opening up for questions. I do see Dr. Ward had put in the chat, when will we know who the new SBEC members are? That's a great question. So at our December meeting, We named at the end of the meeting that Dr. Murray, our representative, our superintendent from Ector County, ISD, had retired and unfortunately moved out of state. We will miss him dearly. So he has now officially resigned from the board, and Tommy Coleman, who is our community representative on the SBEC, also shared news that he would not be returning to the board. All new appointees to the board are appointed by the governor's office, and so we will be waiting for additional information on new appointees, and we'll certainly share that information out with the public when it is shared publicly. Any other thoughts or questions for staff before we close out today? All right. Well, thank you to everyone for today. I think in the spirit of continuous improvement, we will send out in our follow-up the information that we've shared today, link to the PDF of the PowerPoint presentation. Again, we're working on standing up that website, and we'll also ask for input and feedback on this meeting structure and ways that we can continue to improve. But thank you, everyone. Hope everyone's staying warm and look forward to seeing you in the coming weeks. Thanks.